Welcome back to the Talking Point, ladies and gentlemen. The show that brings you guys into the studio. It's a big one today. We're talking about the Champions League and who could possibly go on to win it, rating each side. Of course, Dean Critchley is joining me today. How are you doing, buddy?
I'm very well. Excited to be talking all things Champions League with you and our very special guest as well.
Indeed. My good friend is none other than Theo Ogden. Thogden, how are you doing, buddy?
Great to be here. It's all getting a bit heated. We're stages away from the final eight, so it's actually a very serious part of the Champions League now. We've got to look at teams and think they can win it. So we're going to discuss that today. And thanks for having me on the show.
Mate, thank you for joining. I feel like this may have been one of your first times on Football Daily, is it? I think like you've been a couple of times.
But I've been on for full a couple of times, but definitely the first time on the Talking Point and the best time to do it. You've got me on at a very interesting moment.
Thank you. Thank you for giving us your time, mate. Well, let's kick it off then. We're going to go through all of the teams and give you our kind of feelings about how they will do in this year's Champions League. Can they go all the way? And let's kick it off with none other than my beloved Chelsea. Obviously, they beat Borussia Dortmund in the round of 16 to make it through to the quarterfinals. Me and you, Dougie, sat here actually last week, 7 days ago, and watched the game. A solid performance. Theo, what did you think about Chelsea and how do you rate their chances?
I've got a very weird stance on Chelsea and not many people would agree with me. I find it funny how Chelsea, when they do bad in the Premier League, they seem to do well in Europe. And we saw it under so many different managers and again under Tuchel. And I have this weird feeling that they'll go far with Graham Potter, even though so many Chelsea fans are against it and some of them wanted them sacked at one stage. We see Rory come out and say he wanted Mourinho. I think it's crazy. Like any Chelsea fan that doesn't back Potter at this stage is mad. I was there for the Dortmund game. They cleared them out. They took their chances. And that was the difference. They started taking chances and that's when they kill off teams. I think if they fully focus on Europe and they get a decent draw, maybe Benfica in the next round, they could go all the way to the final. And from then, who knows? They beat City in the final at Porto, so they've got it in them. They've got the minerals.
I do agree. I mean, I definitely agree. I actually sat here, me and Dougie, in the office earlier being like, which teams would I take? And to be honest, I wouldn't even take Benfica the way they performed in the Champions League. They're quite impressive, Theo. But I do agree. I think Chelsea kind of have this weird history in the Champions League where you're right. When things aren't going so well in the league, they somehow seem to kind of get together and perform. I always kind of say when we talk about the Champions League, I literally do believe anybody can win it. Like normally the best team in Europe isn't actually the team that goes on to win the Champions League. Over 2 legs, I really do believe you can beat anybody. If you get a lucky goal, you can defend very well. Especially, to be honest, now with no away goals, they can actually maybe encourage other kind of ways of winning rather than obviously trying to get a goal away and then shut up shop at home. Dougie, as I said, you were there to watch Borussia Dortmund with me. How do you feel Chelsea's chances?
I feel pretty confident, like you guys, that they could spring a surprise in this competition. We've seen worse sides than Chelsea go further. I mean, Leipzig, Lyon a few years ago, Ajax in 2018-19, of course. I mean, that was an emerging team under Ten Hag, of course. But it feels like this Chelsea side have big-level tournament experience in the Champions League, getting to the cup finals in the FA Cup, League Cup last year, of course. So they know how to get through cup competitions, and there's a little bit of growing momentum. I think I wouldn't go too far because we've seen Chelsea slightly rise and fall at different points this season, like Liverpool. The only thing consistent about them is their inconsistency. But at the same time, it's slowly looking better. And I actually thought the amount of pressure they're under in that home leg at Stamford Bridge, for Raheem Sterling, Kai Havertz, big players to pop up in those big moments, Graham Potter can take a lot of belief from that into the quarterfinals.
Yeah, Kai Havertz is a kind of big game player actually for Chelsea at times. Obviously, they've only lost 2 games this season. Lost to Dynamo Zagreb, that was under Thomas Tuchel, and also lost to Borussia Dortmund in the first leg. Obviously, then won 2-0 at Stamford Bridge. I do worry slightly about the goals front, Theo. I do slightly worry about the goals because they've only scored 12 so far in the competition. Their highest goal scorer is Raheem Sterling. Is that maybe your biggest concern? Because defensively, they're not really too bad.
We haven't seen much of Chilwell and Reece James fully fit. And when they come back, you know the amount of chances created is a massive difference. And that allows the likes of Mudryk maybe to gel in, João Felix to score goals. I saw in the Dortmund first leg, I was there in Germany, the amount of chances Felix had was incredible. It wasn't the problem how many chances you made, it was actually finishing them. And that comes down to confidence. And once Chelsea start getting results, like you have recently, Leicester away, Dortmund at home, that's when things kick into gear. So I don't think goals scored, from the last 2 games, you've scored 6 goals. Why is that a worry right now? It isn't. You've built something there and you should be confident, Zach, as a Chelsea fan. And as Dougie agrees with us too, I no longer see it as a problem, but I also think defensively, with the experience and leadership skills of Thiago Silva, and if you do play a back three, you limit the opposition to so many moments. That's when City really crumbled, because they just can break through.
Yes, look, all very positive. I will take it. If I had to really give you a solid estimate where you think Chelsea will finish, Theo, where do you think? If you had to say roughly, semis, do you think they make the final?
I'm saying semi-final, but underdog.
Underdog, semi-final. I like it. I like the way you think. Diggy, quick one.
I've got a sneaky feeling you might get quite a tough draw, a Bayern or a Real Madrid maybe, and it could be curtains.
Yeah. I prefer Real Madrid to Bayern Munich, I think. Okay, then let's move on to our next team, Benfica, who beat Club Brugge 5-1 in their game, 7-1 on aggregate. They had a group containing Juventus and PSG, and they actually never lost a game in that group. They beat Juventus twice, in fact, as well. They are yet to lose a game in the competition. They scored 23 goals, Digi. They've conceded 8. Do you think these are maybe the underdogs?
Yeah, they're definitely the underdogs, but I don't think they mind that status. I mean, they're in that group with Juventus and PSG, didn't lose a game in that. I think they've only lost, I think it's 1 in about 40 games this year, which is quite incredible. And that was when the Enzo Fernandez story was first breaking in January. Team was a little bit distracted, but under Roger Schmidt, he's got João Mario playing the best football of his career. Rafa Silva just keeps on getting better. And they've got a guy in Gonzalo Ramos up front who's just seemingly made for the big occasion. Hat-trick in the last 16 of the World Cup against Switzerland, another couple of goals against Bruges in the last 16. And I don't think anyone wants to draw Benfica. And if you do, I think you're underestimating them.
Interesting. Theo, you mentioned that Chelsea might be quite confident if they got Benfica. How do you think about their chance in the Champions League?
Yeah, I'll take that back. Benfica are very respected, and to top a Champions League group above PSG showed real cojones. But not just that, because they went to Maccabi Haifa and scored 6 goals, and that created the goal difference for them to be in first place. So they have that humility in them, where they'll beat you, but they'll beat you until you're completely dead. And it's not just that. They've proven that even when Enzo Fernandez has been sold, they've cashed in 120 million, but they haven't respent it. They believe in the boys that they've already got. And you mentioned a few players, but one man I really want to respect during his Champions League run is João Mario, the attacking midfielder. 6 goals, 2 assists. He's kept that stats up in the Portuguese league as well. And you've got a team that are 8 points adrift of Porto. So they're not just performing in Europe, they're performing in the league. And that shows real quality. When you could do it in 2 competitions at the same time, that's when you know they can go right to the very top. We've seen teams like Union Berlin, who have been top of the Bundesliga, but Europa League games have creeped them down to 5th place. We're not seeing that with Benfica. Don't write them off against anybody.
Okay, and if I had to say where you think they'll finish?
That's a tough question. Because of who they're going to get in the next round, I think I can see them getting a really difficult draw. I'm going to go quarterfinals.
Quarterfinals for Benfica. Diggs, quick one.
It's quarters or semis. I can't see them getting to the final.
Why
not? Why don't we just go semis?
Oh, they'll take that every day of the week. Okay, then let's move on to one of the big boys, Bayern Munich. They beat PSG 3-0 on aggregate, obviously 2-0 in most recent game. Topped the kind of group of death as well. They had Barcelona and Inter Milan. They've won every game so far in the tournament. Doogie, it's kind of felt like sometimes when people talk about Bayern this season, they've been a bit iffy, but in the Champions League, they've put everyone to the sword.
Yeah, they've been phenomenal. I think they've only conceded 2 goals in the whole competition, which, considering the calibre of opposition they faced, Barcelona twice, Inter twice, PSG twice. As you say, I think that's really impressive. And Bayern's the sort of club where anything less than a win in any game is a disaster. They drew, I think, 3-1-1 in the Bundesliga in January, which was the first time they'd done that since the late 70s, I believe. And it was suddenly like, is Nagelsmann under pressure? It's all falling apart. But I thought this was a really controlled performance against PSG. I didn't think they were necessarily at their glittering best going forward. Thomas Müller, Jamal Musiala, we probably didn't see that absolute best, but the way they controlled Mbappe, particularly in that second leg with Upamecano and De Ligt, and slightly bullied Messi in the middle of the park, I thought was a really impressive victory.
Okay, and Theo, how do you think they'll get on in this Champions League? As you mentioned, they managed to handle PSG pretty well. It feels like they could handle anyone, right?
They can go all the way. The Germans have something in them where they know how to get the job done. And I actually was watching the game on BT Sport against PSG, and the pundits were saying that there's pressure on Nagelsmann. I think they don't know what they're talking about. Everyone there is backing the young manager. Yes, he's younger than Messi, but he's got more skills as a manager than anybody else. And the way he led them to a controlled clean sheet and motivated players like De Ligt, Alphonso Davies, but even benched lads like Cancelo, and you've got Stanisic coming in, who's been good in the Bundesliga, but you're playing into PSG, you're facing the best wingers in the world in Mbappe, and you have the confidence to drop the best fullback in the world. That screams a team that has depth, and quality all around the pitch. I think they can go very far. They've got Choupo-Moting looking better than Lewandowski.
Yeah, Choupo-Moting and Sane both on 4 goals. Well, Theo says the final. I feel like saying they can get to the final is a pretty confident one. Do you think?
Yeah.
You also agree?
I think given the calibre of opposition they faced and beaten, I'm actually going winners.
Winners. Okay, very interesting. Heard it here first. We go from Bayern Munich now to AC Milan, who obviously beat Tottenham Hotspur. They drew 0-0 at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, obviously won 1-0 at the San Siro. Now, this is where I think things get a little bit interesting, because in the group games, they had Chelsea. Overall, they lost 5-0 over 2 legs to Chelsea. They also did manage to beat Salzburg 4-0 as well. It's kind of like AC Milan's story of this season, dudes, isn't it? Like, sometimes they are performing exceptionally well, and then a game later they are performing quite poorly. Obviously, in this competition, Giroud is their top goal scorer, 4 goals, 2 assists. How are you feeling about AC Milan? As far they can get. I guess it depends if they draw.
It depends on the draw for sure, but I feel like they're slightly paying the price for a pretty poor summer business. They didn't really cash in on their position in Serie A, winning that first title in 11 years. I think Charles de Ketelaere was their main signing at 30 million. I think he's yet to score in about 30 appearances. Not ideal, although he's very young, so probably needs a bit more time. Malik Thiaw, who they brought in as a young centre-back who's made a massive difference since they reverted to a back 3 in recent weeks. But it wasn't a thrilling tie against Spurs, to say the least. And I actually thought the scoreline slightly flattered Spurs, because in the San Siro they could have got another 2, I think. But yeah, not been a brilliant season for Pioli's men. And I think they'll just be glad to make a Champions League quarter-final for, I think, the first time since 2012. So it's been a while.
Interesting. And obviously, Rafa Leao's kind of been the headline name, Theo, but we haven't really seen too much from him in the end. 1 goal, 2 assists in the competition. Reece James seemed to deal with him pretty easily when he played against Chelsea. Not necessarily made the game electric against Spurs, but do you think he could be quite key in the next game?
I think he can, and he turns up in the biggest games. I was at the Milan derby, the first one this season at San Siro, and Milan were at home. It was a 3-1 win to Milan. Rafael Leao just completely ran the show. When you've got Theo Hernandez back to full fitness, you'll see the best side of the Portugueseman on the wing. That left flank is one of the best attacking sides in Europe. That's why everybody wants the pair of them. And I think it's been difficult for Pioli this season. When you win a Scudetto, a lot of the players, in their heads, they were confident then, they were excited. You don't know what else to play for. This season, right off Serie A, the full priority is on Champions League, and they could be a surprising underdog. We know Milan have that history of winning Europe, and we may see a little run, but I'm going to sit here and say quarterfinals because I think they'll get a tough draw.
Fair. You doing it?
I'm with Thugden, quarter-final exit.
Okay, there we go. Inter Milan progressed last night after beating Porto. Theo, Inter Milan this season in the Serie A have been, again, a little bit like AC Milan, a bit wishy-washy. How do you feel their chances are in the Champions League?
Well, they're too many points adrift of Napoli, so focus on Champions League. They've got a pretty solid defence. I'm going to say off semi-final. We'll give them a win.
Semi-final. I like to hear it. Obviously, Edin Dzeko, Dougie, has been quite crucial for them this season. Lukaku as well is finally finding his feet, some fitness. Do you think they need those two? Obviously, they need those two to be fit for it, but how important can they be depending on who they get?
Yeah, massively. I think everyone's maybe a slightly more underwhelmed with Lukaku, but Lautaro Martinez, I think, has been the shining light for them. And this is their final few months of that defence. I think De Vrij is out of contract in the summer. Skriniar is going to leave on a free to PSG. So this is a great opportunity for them to progress deep into a competition before Lukaku potentially leaves and 2 other massive players leave as well.
Okay, well, that moves us on nicely into our next team, Manchester City, who managed to beat RB Leipzig despite being level going into the second leg. I feel like every time we talk about the Champions League, Man City are kind of the team we always go, they're probably the favourites. It feels like this is their year, finally it will happen. However, it never does. But this year, Theo, they've got Erling Haaland. Do you think he can be the difference? And where do you think they'll finish?
I think he will end up in the Champions League top goal scorer. Whether they'll win the Champions League, it's going to take a lot. When you haven't done it before, history does come into play. We've seen that previous years in Liverpool, Real Madrid, even Chelsea. When you've done it before, you've got that history there. With City, I think it's going to be hard. They are favourites for a reason, though. I think they'll play Bayern in the final. I've not said a winner yet, so I'm going to say Man City.
I like it. I mean, Theo, as just said, probably the best team in the world will win it. Or well, Arsenal on here, I guess. Dougie, very quickly touching upon City, how do you rate their chance?
I think they've got slightly worse in every area this year, to be honest. And that's not me having a go at Haaland, just the way they use him. I'd be more confident of their chances if De Bruyne was in better form as well. Hasn't been his best season, slightly in and out of the side recently. I still think they've got a great chance of going all the way, but I think Bayern are a more complete side and slightly more settled at the moment as well.
It would be quite typical of football, right? The time when Man City probably aren't at their best is actually when they go on to win it. But there we have it. But let's move on to our teams that are actually going to be playing today. So we'll kind of cover them both at the same time, who we think will progress and how do we think it will go down. Napoli versus Frankfurt is tonight, Theo. Napoli are, quite frankly, scary, frightening form at the moment. They've won 6 and lost 1 so far in the competition, scored 22 goals. Talk to me about Naples.
I'm actually upset I've already said a winner because nothing could stop Napoli right now. I watched them against Atalanta. The way Kvaratskhelia is playing is just special. He's a Georgian god. He's playing like Maradona. I just think Spalletti has got everything perfect. The way they play, the attack, the balance with Osimhen, his runs, his physical play to bring other wingers into the game, to have Lozano off the bench. They've got everything. I just don't see a problem with them. I can't wait for them to play a big European team to see how they compete against that. And they cleared out Liverpool, especially at home, but then they lost away. So it could be, I'd love to see Napoli-Chelsea in the next round. That's what I want to see.
You would love it. I would not. But I actually think it would be really interesting. Even seeing the likes of like Osimhen go up against as well Premier League defences, and it'd be like a kind of a nice testing point to see what he's like, especially when obviously he's being rumoured for over 100 million euros in the summer. Dougie, let's touch upon it as well. The Napoli-Frankfurt. You agree? You think Napoli's going to progress, and where do you think they'll finish? 2 up already.
Yeah, I think they'll progress, and this has actually got to be remembered as a bit of an achievement in itself. Napoli have never made a European Cup quarter-finals. This is their first time in that stage, if they are to make it.
Crazy.
Which is crazy. But yeah, fair play to Frankfurt. Europa League last year, they're having a solid Bundesliga campaign under Oliver Glasner, and despite the loss of Kostic in the summer, I think everyone thought it was going to be going a lot more worse or a lot more challenging campaign. So well done to them.
Where do you think Napoli are finishing?
Napoli, I think a semi-final. I don't know how many semi-finalists I picked now, but
7.
I think I'm going Man City Bayern in the final. Bayern win.
Okay. All right, finally, we've got to touch upon Real Madrid versus Liverpool. Obviously, Real Madrid are winning 5-2 after scoring 5 away goals at Anfield. Imagine if the away goal rule was still intact. I mean, it feels maybe a little bit like there's no point in talking too much about Liverpool, Theo. How do you feel about this tie? Do you think Liverpool have no chances? And where do you think Real Madrid will finish?
I've already said that Liverpool have never write them off. I remember 18-19 season, Barcelona. I know the second leg, they needed to go and win by 4 goals. Of course, away goals mattered then, and they brought it back to Anfield, which was a big deal. But at the same time, going to Santiago Bernabeu, I mean, some of the English clubs have been there and failed. And that's why I'm saying Real Madrid through. I actually think Liverpool will win 2-1. I think they'll score 2 early goals, and then Real Madrid will score, and then it's over. It's too many goals, too little time. They'll close down the game and it'll be done. I think Real Madrid won't win the Champions League this year, but they'll have a respectable finish. I can see them getting to the semi-finals.
Okay, I mean, never doubt Real Madrid though, Dougie, right? It feels like every time with this competition, the Champions League. Last year, I remember going, well, they get knocked out by this team. They didn't. Okay, they'll get knocked out by this team. They didn't. They made it against Liverpool. Okay, Liverpool win it. And then they went on to go on and lift the trophy. Do you feel like we could maybe apply the same here, Dougie?
Possibly, quite possibly. I don't, as you say, no one saw them beating PSG, Chelsea, Man City with, a second half hat trick in the second leg for Benzema against PSG, late goals in the other 2 ties as well. But on this occasion, I think it's just a step too far. They haven't really clicked in La Liga this year. They've had some injury issues. Tchouaméni and Kroos missed the first leg as well. So we should remember that they might be even more strengthened for this second leg of the last 16. But I just think they're just not quite settled enough to go all the way this year. But at the same time, never write them off.
Semis?
Semis.
Okay, well, there we have it. We've rated your team's chances at lifting the Champions League trophy. Seems like Bayern Munich are our eventual winners. Let us know who you think will go on to do it, how you think the teams that we've mentioned will do in the comments below. Theo, thank you so much for helping us out. I really appreciate it. We'll make sure your links and everything are in the descriptions. Go check Theo out. He's making great content, absolutely smashing it. As always, guys, if you want to see more Football Daily content, click on screen right now. Don't forget to like and subscribe to Football Daily, and we'll see you very soon.